Hi, my name is Tim Hunt, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, and we're out in sunny Phoenix, Arizona for our meeting on the Mesa. I am delighted to be joined here today by Sarah Emond, who's the CEO at ICER. Sarah, welcome to ARM Studios.
It's my pleasure to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you in the Valley of the Sun, although it's very hot out.
It's very hot. We're melting a little bit.
Very hot. Listen, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your background, what your career path has been over the years, and then tell us a little bit more about ICER.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's fun about being at a meeting about cell and gene therapy is that I started my career in clinical research at an academic medical center, and then my first industry job was at Genome Therapeutics, which was sequencing the human genome in the olden days. And we thought to ourselves, maybe one day this whole effort of sequencing the genome will actually lead to therapeutics, and sort of here we are.
Here we are.
So after spending about a decade in industry, working in corporate communications, and getting a degree in public policy, I found my way to ICER when it was pretty small. There were just 3 of us, and we were trying to do this sort of experiment about whether or not the US healthcare system was ready for what's called health technology assessment. It's this idea that we've got limited resources in our healthcare system, and how do we pay for medicines that give the most value to the most patients with those constraints? Something that's really common in Europe because they have a single payer healthcare system, or it's all government funded, something that wasn't so common in the US. And so about 16, 17 years ago, we started experimenting with different methods, and now we do reviews of a lot of therapeutics, including cell and gene therapy, taking an approach of trying to think about how do we judge the clinical effectiveness and how do we judge the value, meaning how does the price match the benefit that patients are receiving. Yeah,
that's great. And maybe tell us a little bit more about how does ICER think about these reviews?
Yeah, I mean, we take what's considered a population health perspective, and I think that's a really important part to understand about value assessment or health technology assessment. We're answering questions about what do we do from a health systems perspective, not just an individual patient perspective. They're not necessarily in conflict, but that's a very different thing when you're trying to produce information to support patient-level decision-making, shared decision-making. And so the approach we take is to answer 2 fundamental questions. One is what we're doing now any better than what we've done before? That's the comparative clinical effectiveness piece. So if we've got a new drug for rheumatoid arthritis, is it better than all of the other drugs we have for RA? And then we ask the question, okay, if it is better, how much better? And that's a very patient-centered approach of thinking about the different things that patients care about: feeling better, having fewer side effects, living longer if it's life-limiting. And then we take all of that together and we say, okay, how much of that benefit are we getting, and how much are we paying for that benefit? And that's the part that's a harder conversation to have, and one that we don't shy away from, because we know that when we overspend for health and we spend too much money for health gains, we actually can harm other people in the healthcare system. So what we try to do at ICER is take this approach of where's that balance? How can we incentivize really great innovation by paying for really great impacts for patients, and then make sure that we're not overpaying for things that might be just as good as what we're already doing.
Right. Great, thanks. And maybe take us through a little bit, if you were talking to a patient, how would you explain the work you guys have done? You've done a lot of pioneering work in cell and gene therapy. Take us by the hand, walk us through how do you see cell and gene therapy? I mean, it hasn't gone unnoticed that the price of some gene therapies and some cell therapies has raised a couple of eyebrows, but how do you guys see it? Tell us about your analyses.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really helpful about thinking about our work and how we talk to a patient about it or a different decision maker is our work isn't about just saying, oh, the price is too high. There's work out there that people are doing. Prescription drug prices get a lot of attention, but we're not doing that work because sometimes actually a high price is justified. So what we try to communicate to patients is there is an ecosystem that is really healthy when we are paying a lot for really big gains for patients. And so how we measure that, whether it's quality of life, length of life, fewer side effects, impact on caregivers, we put all of that together and say, this is how much better this drug is. Cell and gene therapies are really interesting because we're delivering a ton of value in one treatment. So a lot of our analyses have shown that many millions of dollars might be a very fair price for that therapy. And we've got a system that's not really prepared to pay for that in some cases. And that's one of the bummers of the work that we're doing right now in cell and gene therapy, is trying to get everyone to realize that a big price doesn't mean you shouldn't pay for it. And how are we going to evolve that payment system?
Right. Yeah, and that's a passion of ours, a shared passion.
It is a shared passion.
We really think we need to continue to try to evolve the healthcare system, both from a regulatory perspective, but also from a payer perspective, to embrace these new modalities.
Absolutely.
I know we're aligned on that.
We are.
Some of the commercial launches that have taken place thus far in the cell and gene therapy space have been very strong, right? Some have been spectacular, some have been quite good, and I think there's a lot of hope and excitement about the field and some of these commercial launches. And some have been a little bit slower. How do you see that? Unpack that for us from your perspective.
You know, one of the things that I've learned, we've done a lot of patient engagement work at ICER, learning from the patient community about what they care about and how they think about things like value. And one thing that I learned very early on from the patient community is they are not a monolith.
Right.
And I think that what we're seeing here in the cell and gene therapy space is that there are communities, and I'll name the hemophilia community, that actually is doing quite well with their standard of care.
Right.
And they don't really want to disrupt that.
Yeah.
Not speaking universally for all patients with hemophilia, but from our conversations with patients, they're feeling great on Factor. They love their connection to their hemophilia treatment center. And a gene therapy that might eliminate the need for Factor is not high on their list. You talk to a parent who gets the devastating news that their kid has spinal muscular atrophy, it's a really easy yes to go for a gene therapy for that. And so I think that we need a lot of things we need to remember a lot of things. Not all gene therapies are the same.
Yep.
They're doing different things for different patients at different times, and that patients aren't monoliths when they think about how they want to approach these therapies. Right. I think sickle cell is another example that we also, as a community, right, we are so easily into wonk speak, right? Using the acronyms, like talking really nerdy.
Talking to ourselves.
And we need to do a lot more to have communication out to different communities about what cell and gene therapies are, what they're not, when they might be appropriate, when they might not. And that's work we need to do. And I always think of the sickle cell community when I think of that, because I know we haven't seen the uptake that we thought in that community so far.
Yeah. You'll be joining a panel that we're doing on cell and gene therapy ethics and society. And I was really struck, I think it was 2 JP Morgans ago when I ran into Steve Pearson. And he said, we had a great conversation. He said, that's one of the reasons why we founded ICER once upon a time, that his background was actually as a bioethicist, going back many years, which I think I knew, but I had forgotten. So just maybe tell us about your take on ethics writ large and cell and gene therapy, just at a highest level.
Well, value assessment and asking these really important questions about how much we're paying for health gain is fundamentally an ethical question. If we are a system that's using pooled resources to pay for healthcare for the most people, my God, is there a bigger ethical question that sort of impacts all of us? And so our roots are really based in this idea that we can have these really hard but important conversations if we do them transparently, if we do them in public, if we bring all of the stakeholders together, even the ones who might disagree with us. I mean, an ICER public meeting is not meant to be a kumbaya situation. It's really meant to hear different perspectives. And that ethical foundation is from Steve Pearson, ICER's founder, because he was really interested in his own experience as a physician of how to think about using limited resources to deliver care to his patients, because he was in a capitated model way back in the olden days.
Right. Well, listen, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you for coming out to sunny Phoenix, Arizona, and thank you for joining us at In Arm Studios.
Anytime. Thank you, Tim.